the tax changes. And that big headline, of course, the new sugar levy on soft drinks and on the industry itself to be introduced in 2018. Lots of interest in that, understandably, and we're already getting lots of reaction to it too, so we can discuss that. The tax-free personal allowance to rise to £11,500 in 2017. The higher rate tax threshold to rise to £45,000 in 2017. And corporation tax, another cut there, to fall to 17% by April of 2020. So some big tax changes there. Let's look at pensions and savings because again, there were some very eye-catching initiatives. This new lifetime ISA for the under 40s, lots of emphasis here on the younger generation. The government boosting the savings by 25% in this new concept of an ISA. We can talk about that. The annual ISA allowance right now, by the way, will be increased to £20,000 next April, and there'll be no change to tax relief on pension contributions. There was a lot of debate about that before this budget. No changes to tax relief on pension contributions. A look at duties then. Fuel duty frees will be extended for another year, which brought a very big round of applause. Well, not quite a cheer then on the Conservative benches and elsewhere in the House too. Beer and cider duty will be frozen again, and the duty on whisky, other spirits also frozen. And glancing across the House to the serried ranks of the Scottish National Party at that point, the Chancellor, and then other alcohol duties, including wine, to rise by inflation. So a few changes there to note. Let's have a look at some other tax changes because we went through quite a few details. Again, Class 2 national insurance contributions to be scrapped for self-employed workers. Chancellor talked a lot about helping small business and the self-employed. Capital gains tax, that rate is cut from 28 to 20% and to 10% for basic rate taxpayers. So a big change on capital gains tax. And there will be an increase in insurance premium tax. That is going up by 0.5%. Now, on the forecasts, because there's a lot of interest in these, simply because a few eyebrows were raised along the way. The Office of Budget Responsibility revising the growth forecast downwards. A couple of people saying sharply downwards, but certainly they were moving downwards. Public spending to be cut by an extra £3.5 billion a year by 2019-20. So more spending cuts on the way. The inflation forecast by the OBR to be 0.7% this year, 1.6% next year. But he again underlined that the basic target of 2% is still there. Borrowing, let's talk about borrowing. 72.2 billion this year, falling to 55.5 billion in 2016-17. But we need to talk about some of the targets there as well in terms of borrowing and the deficit itself, because I think that's one of the more controversial areas. Let's look at transport. Still going through some of these measures in today's budget. The green light for the HS3 rail link, that is between Manchester and Leeds. We've talked about that in the past, but today the go-ahead's been given. They'll commission the Crossrail 2. That's a very, very big infrastructure project linking North and South London. Crossrail 1, of course, the current Crossrail. The Elizabeth line is the one that will be opening relatively soon, east to West London. And then from 2018... gosh, how many times have I driven down the M4 wondering when these tolls would be changed? The 7 crossing tolls to be halved. Not got rid of altogether, but the tolls along the 7 crossing will be halved. Business, a new threshold for small business rate relief to rise from 6,000 to a maximum of 15,000. Business rates, an uprating to be switched from RPI to the lower measure of inflation, which is CPI. Affecting the levels of business rates there, and commercial stamp duty rates to be reduced for lower value properties. There are quite a few changes around business rates, which we can discuss with Simon in a short while. Let's have a look at a few other measures for you. I told you it was packed with stuff, and on we go. Every school in England, as we reported yesterday, to become an academy by the year 2020, no choice involved in that, but the academy status, they say, will give more freedom to these schools. New national funding formula for schools in England, allied to that measure. And then new powers, this was big, very significant, new powers over criminal justice to be devolved to Greater Manchester. There were very big measures today in terms of devolving power to the English regions, with new mayoral authorities in different parts in East and West England. And there I'm talking about Greater Manchester. The Greater London Authority to retain all of its business rate income from April 2017. Again, that is a significant financial measure there. I think we've got a few more to go. I'm just taking you through 2 or 3 more. The supplementary tax on oil and gas producers halved to 10%. So very, very important news, especially, of course, in Scotland, the heart of the oil and gas industry in the UK. So a big piece of news for us to consider in that Scottish context. £700 million additional funding for flood defences. Well, of course, there'll be lots of people debating that and wondering whether, you know, that's it's welcome, but it would have been welcome too maybe a year or 2 years ago. And then the new Shakespeare North Theatre. This is part of the cultural rebuilding that the Chancellor was talking about. Not just infrastructure, as we can see it in roads and bridges, but cultural infrastructure. Shakespeare North Theatre to be built in Knowsley.